Hi, everyone. My name is Kat Erdahl, and I'd like to thank you all for watching the Adoptees as Parents panel. Today, we have four parents here who are also adoptees, of course. And I'm just going to jump into it and start with introductions. So I'll go first, and then the panelists will introduce themselves afterwards. So again, my name is Kat Erdahl. I am the host and organizer of this panel today. I was adopted from Guatemala in 1997, and I currently live in Iowa. And I am going to pass the mic over to Andrew. And if we just want to introduce yourselves, maybe say where you're currently living, a little bit about your family, since today's panel is about parenthood and families as adoptees. So I'm going to pass the mic over to you.
Hi, thanks, Kat, for hosting this and putting this all together. My name is Andrew. I was born in Guatemala City in 1991. I was adopted within that same year. I currently live in the Metro Detroit area, working in automotive engineering. It's just kind of what you do in the Detroit area is automotive. I have a wife who I first met in first grade, and then we got married right after college. So I've known her quite a long time, and together we have 3 kids. I have a son who is 8, a daughter who is 4, and another son who is 3. So we are very, very busy at our house. Chaos is kind of our theme, but we thrive in it. So it's a little bit of who I am.
Well, thank you so much. That's crazy, all the way to first grade. That's awesome. And then I'm going to pass the mic over to Jenny.
Hi, my name is Jenny Corliss. I currently live in West Valley City, Utah. I was adopted in 1982. I was born in Guatemala City. I have 2 children, and I get the word chaos. That is definitely something that is at my home. So I have 2 children. They are boys. I have a 9 and a 4-year-old. They keep me busy and fun.
Well, thank you, Jenny. And I'm going to pass the mic over to Santiago.
Hi, my name is Santiago Ginrich. I live in Ontario, near Toronto, Ontario, and I was adopted in 1974, and I was born in Tecpan, Guatemala. So I have 3 children, 18-year-old, 16-year-old, and 15-year-old. If I would have, I should have thought of it, but my wife has a little sign on the wall, and I would have brought it over here to show you, but it says, some people call it chaos, we call it family. So that's.
Well, thank you, Santiago. And then I'm going to pass the mic over to Maggie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie Bailey. I was adopted from Guatemala City, Guatemala, and I'm here in St. Louis, Missouri. And I completely understand the chaos right now. I actually just had my second, I have 2 boys. I have one who's a little over a year and a half, and I just had my second son 2 weeks ago. So we are living chaos right now. 2 under 2 is pretty crazy. But yeah, so I'm excited to talk with all of you all about being a parent. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for introducing yourselves. I'm going to jump right into the questions for our panelists. So our first question today is, since we just kind of introduced ourselves and our families, our first question is, do you talk to your children about adoption or your adoption or adoption in general? And I am going to pass the mic over to Jenny.
So I come from a large family. There's 8 of us that are adopted and total of 10 kids. And so I have talked to my children about adoption because we talk about their aunts and uncles because they're coming from other families as well. Recently, this past year, I've been trying to understand more about my adoption and my Guatemalan identity. So we've been talking a little bit more. They are young, but I think it's important for me to share that with them.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over to Santiago.
So for us as a family, yes, we do talk about adoption. My children understand what adoption's all about, and they it's so yeah, we talk about it. I find that they don't find it's embarrassing. It's just part of who we are as a family. That's the sense I get from them.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to pass the mic over to Andrew.
Yeah, so we talk about it. Growing up in my family, my older brother was also adopted from Peru. And then I have a cousin who was also adopted from Guatemala. So in growing up, it was more taboo not to talk about adoption. And so once I had kids, it was kind of the same thing of explaining it to them. That here's why I don't look like grandma. Here's why I don't look like some of your cousins, your aunts and uncles. And it's unfortunate, I watch the news all the time, the local news, and some of the national news is, pouring into the local news. And so my son's been asking, why do they keep mentioning Guatemala in the news? And so it's important that I kind of explain to him, part of the reasons I was adopted, and this is where he comes from. And so it's been a natural, healthy conversation we've had. The younger two, because they're 4 and 3, they don't really understand, but my daughter, she runs around saying she's Malin. So that's about the extent of that one.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And that brings us to our second question, which is a question that I think was one of our most requested questions on the list of questions that I have here. And that is, how has being an adoptee shaped your views on parenthood, or has it? I'm going to pass the mic over to Jenny.
So that's a really good question. When my husband and I were first thinking of having children, just me being adoptee wasn't really something I thought of back then. But now that I'm older and I'm again trying to discover who I am, Guatemalan, it has changed a ton. Like, I want my children to know more about me, but also themselves. They're Guatemalan. So I think as I'm getting older, I'm learning. So it's important for me to share that with them.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to pass the mic over to Santiago.
I think for me, the biggest thing was the fact that just having my own family. It was for me, it was becoming a. I always struggled with identity, with knowing who I was, where I fit in, and once I became a parent, then for me it was all of a sudden, this is who I am. This is who we are as a family, and so we incorporated a lot of Guatemalan into our culture, into our home life, because that's just who we are. That I think that was the biggest thing for me.
Thank you so much. And that actually leads us directly into another one of my questions on my list, which was,
yeah. I'm sorry. My little hand icon, since I'm on my phone, I don't think it's not working. Can I answer this?
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Yes, please go ahead. I'm so sorry about that.
I just wanted to tag on to what Santiago said. I think for at least other, other adoptees that I've talked to, but I know especially for me, that identity issue, I think is huge. And I know it's almost, I feel like as a parent, becoming a parent, this sounds really strange, but it's almost like it's come full circle for me. Being an adoptee, and then now becoming a parent, having that experience, especially as a woman, with child, inside of me, I think it really made me closer to trying to better understand some of those identity issues that I've had in the past from being adopted, and trying to connect with back to my culture and being Guatemalan and some of those things that I've struggled with over the years. So but I definitely, I just wanted to piggyback on that identity issue, and as a parent really having that kind of that foundation, being there again in a really strange but also really nice way also.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll have to figure out a better way for for me to call on you. But if you want to right now, like maybe even raise your hand, I can see you, and I'll write your name down, if that works for you. And then piggybacking off of what Santiago was talking about Guatemalan culture, another question that came largely from the Guatemalan adoptee community on NGG as a whole was, do you incorporate Guatemalan culture in your family's life, such as say holidays or food, or is there, I guess the question is, do you incorporate Guatemalan culture in your family and children's life? I'm going to pass the mic over to Santiago.
So yes, we do. We eat a lot of Guatemalan food. We also go to, there aren't very many Guatemalan events here in this area, but we go to the ones that we can. We've also visited Guatemala several times, and so our children know what country they are from, or I'm from, and they're from as well. And so yeah, and then we also talk Spanish here at home. And so they understand it, they're starting to speak it. So in that sense, we also have a lot of Hispanic friends. So we are incorporating the Guatemalan culture into their lives.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I keep piggybacking off of what you're saying here, but I wanted to do that once again. And I know that a few of you had talked about how being an adoptee has affected your own identity or being a parent has kind of affected your own identity as an adoptee. And so that's actually our next question. Our next question is, how did becoming a parent affect your understanding / feelings around your personal adoption? I'm going to call on Maggie.
Thanks. The benefit of just raising my hand here. I would say, so this is the weird thing. So my first son was born, I have an August birthday, and my first son was born like 3 days after my birthday. So it was this weird, during my entire pregnancy, I felt this connection with my birth mother of like, this is probably, she was pregnant with me at this time. She was this many weeks with me at this time. And I think that was really, I think it was difficult. It was really difficult because I kept thinking, oh my gosh, like, and then then I was gone. And so I think I struggled with that a lot, but I also identified with, this was this path that my birth mother had taken. And obviously it's, I'm in Missouri and it's very different in a lot of other aspects. But just having that same timeline of, just having my son, and when I was born, I did feel this closeness that I never really felt to Guatemala, to my birth parent, just to all of that. And I think that really, if anything, it was a huge catalyst for me becoming more interested in our culture and our people, getting more connected to other Guatemalan adoptees here in St. Louis, which there's a lot. And so I would say that, again, it was really kind of an eye-opening experience for me in terms of that connection.
Thank you so much. And that is going to lead us again to another question here. I have, for adoptees who are co-parenting with a non-adoptee, what, if any, are some differences you've noticed between the way that you've approached parenting versus your partner? And I'm going to pass the mic over to Santiago.
I think out of all the questions that were asked, I think this was probably maybe one of the harder ones for me, just because. So what are some of the differences? Because one thing I can't really pinpoint is the fact that because I was never a parent before as a non-adoptee, I can't pinpoint an exact that this is why I parent because of being adopted. Now, but one thing definitely is the fact that I grew up in a very strict traditional home. So one thing that I always told myself is that I was not going to be a strict parent, if that makes any sense. I in my home, I always felt forced to do something, and I wanted my children to feel like to learn, but as well to be able to want to do things out of a want to instead of a have to attitude. And so that might be one of the things as far as because of being adopted. I really don't know how I would have reacted otherwise as a non-adoptee, as a parent that was a non-adoptee. But that definitely, that not wanting to be as strict is definitely part of, I would say, of being an adoptee.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jenny.
So yeah, reading that question, I was trying to think what differences we have, and I couldn't really pinpoint anything. But for me, for coming from an adoptee family, there's more adoptees in my family. One thing my parents did, they did a lot of different cultural and diversity events, like took us to a lot of different events that were, because my parents are Caucasian. So, I mean, they tried to include us into diversity. And one thing I feel like I've been trying to do is do that as well in our home. And I think my husband has been very supportive of that. And it's like, yeah, because my husband is Caucasian. And I think that's something we do come together and like, let's bring in your culture more, which I'm trying to do now. So I don't see a huge difference, but I can see a difference in how I was raised versus how he was raised because we were coming from two different families. So.
Well, thank you both so much. I am going to, I'm going to move on to the next question. And the next question is, do you share your adoptee status with other parents? Oh, Maggie?
I do. And I do a lot of times it's because as parents, like if you're talking to other moms or dads, a lot of times they'll ask you like, what did your parents, oh, is this genetic or is this that, like I was talking to someone about like does baldness run in the family? And I was like, I have no idea. I was like I'm adopted. I think that comes up a lot more as a parent, at least from what I've seen, that when they're asking about, again, like genetics or, ancestry or history, that I'll mention it, just because, and then obviously every doctor's appointment, which when they're little, you have a lot of them, they constantly are asking you questions. And unless you've done like your due diligence and you have great DNA tests and things like that, at least for me, I don't know anything really. So I think again, that comes up a lot of being adopted and just having that missing information, that missing history from my birth parents. So I think that, again, as a parent, it's made me a little bit more sensitive to other parents asking other questions. I might not ask someone those types of questions because I know, at least for me, sometimes I cringe a little bit when I get asked, even though I'm open about it, but it is a little bit of a, oh, okay, try not to be as intrusive. So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to pass the mic over to Andrew.
Yeah, so it's come up a couple times, because sometimes, I think they mean well, when people ask, are those your kids or not? At least I hope they mean well, because obviously my kids are a lot lighter than I am. So it's come up, and then it's led into some natural good conversations of, what was it like being adopted? How does it feel to be adopted? But similar to what was just said about the medical side of it, it's always been a huge thing. She was like, what about this? What about that? It's like, I don't know. It's whatever I'm facing is, I guess, is the history now where it's going to set the precedent. So it's a curiosity thing. And it's a little different now with my kids in school and facing this whole new dynamics of, them, my son's friends asking him, well, why does your dad look that way? And then he explains it a little bit too of what adoption means to him. And so it's different, but it's interesting, going through this journey a little bit.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I guess I never, as someone who, asked a lot of these questions, I never thought of, but I didn't really think about how your own children might share it as well. And what that feels like as a parent and as an adoptee to hear your kid kind of talking or sharing that their parent is adopted or Guatemalan. So that's really cool to share. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jenny.
So I share it with parents who ask. I don't get it too much now, but yeah, if they're interested, I'll open up a bit. But there is that sense of like, how much do you want to know and how much are you willing to listen? So I just try to be aware of that. But also the medical history. Yeah, just recently we've dealt with some health issues with my son, and or just with me, they just ask, well, what's your history? And I'm like, I don't know. It's just that I don't know. So that is something that I recognize. I'm like, I wish I did, but there's nothing more I can help you doctors with. So.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic to Santiago.
So yes, I share my adoption status with people that ask, and the main reason a lot of people ask is because, as you can see, my last name is Geinrich, and they're like, well, how come you have a Hispanic name, but you have a German last name? And so that's often a conversation starter for us, or for me. And so, yeah, I have learned, like some of you have already said, as far as sharing, there was a time in my life where I didn't want to. I mean, I didn't care to. But now I'm to the point where I have accepted that that is part of who I am, and so I don't mind sharing it anymore. Um, and like Jenny said, sometimes we have to figure out who really wants to hear the short or the long story, and go from there. But I I don't mind anymore sharing with people who ask. Someone also mentioned about our children talking about adoption, and I think that was something really big for me as well, because um, my children do talk about it, because like someone else mentioned, you know, we talk about grandma and grandpa, or we talk about aunts and uncles, and you know, they don't look anything like me, so people are like, you know, how is that possible? And so then, you know, they say, well, my dad's adopted. And so then, and you know, it's so that's another reason why I've learned to accept that that's part of who we are. Um, and it's not going to stop us from um, from being also Hispanic, or in the Guatemalan culture. So
Well, thank you so much. And then I just wanted to piggyback back off of a couple. I think a few of you mentioned the medical history, and that was another question I believe on my list here. And I just wanted to touch on it again to see if anybody had anything to add. But um, as adoptees, one of the biggest, I don't know, things about growing up, especially like, I don't know, you notice when you go to doctor appointments, or I guess people ask you about your family history, and for many of us, we don't know anything. And a lot of times it's don't, you have to check that box of I don't know when it comes to answering any questions regarding our medical history. And there was a question: does that kind of, as an individual, we get very used to checking that box of I don't know, but does it feel different once you have children of your own? I know a few of you had mentioned that it is something that you think about when you have children, that we don't know our health histories. I just wanted to touch on it one more time to see if anybody else wanted to touch on that, add anything to that topic. Perfect. And then, oh, sorry, Maggie.
Well, I was just going to add, yeah, I think I always thought about that in the back of my mind. You know, if I ever had kids, I would want to try to learn more about, you know, my like DNA and genomics and things like that. And that's one thing that I had, like, I've always been over the years a little hesitant to do like the 23andMe and Ancestry and all of those kinds of things. You know, even though I've heard wonderful experiences from other Guatemalan adoptees. But it is something that, especially now with two kids, that I do. It's like, if there's any way that I can at least help figure out, you know, are we more prone to cancer? Are we more prone to this type, you know, diabetes or things like that? You know, especially now with there's so many advances in medicine. That's one of the things that before I had never thought that I would necessarily look into, that now as a parent, I've been, you know, Google searching and things like that. Because it is one of those things where you know, especially as they get older, and you know, I think Jenny mentioned, you know, if anything comes up, I'd love to be able to say maybe 95% of it I don't know, but at least I know a little bit, you know. So I think that with what we have now at our fingertips and resources, at least for me, I am much more open to looking into it and exploring those options now as a parent.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jenny.
Yeah, so the me and 23, I never had interest in doing DNA gosh, until I did it 5 years ago. It was given to me as a gift, just the regular DNA ancestry. And this is where it all started for me, finding this organization. But 23andMe, yeah, I'm interested because medical things have been coming up, and I would like to help and support my kids and figure out what just again, just that little piece, just little things would be so helpful. So I am interested.
Thank you so much. And then I'm going to kind of move the conversation a little bit. So one of the questions that many adoptees get, and I even get it myself sometimes, is like, are you going to adopt yourself? Or I guess, yeah, are you going to adopt yourself? And I get asked that a few times a year, not all the time, but I get asked that pretty often. And I guess my question for you guys is, when you were either planning to start a family or in the past, have you been asked if you were going to adopt yourself? Had you considered adopting yourself? And was that something that you looked into? So yeah, do you get asked that question? How do you feel about that question? And did you consider adoption yourself? Perfect. I'm going to pass the mic over to Santiago.
That's a good question. And yes, I have gotten asked that quite often as well, growing up. So that was, and I never really knew what to think about it when people would ask me about it, because at that point, back when I was younger, I was going through my own issues, but now that I'm married and have 3 children, it's my wife that actually gave me the idea of the what if we were to foster or adopt. And between the time that I was a youth and a parent, I didn't really think about it until my wife brought it up. And I struggled with it. I really did. And I can't really necessarily explain why, but one of the things is that I didn't know whether I could provide a home where the child wouldn't struggle with the same issues that I had struggled with. Even though I would understand the child, even though I would understand the situation, having my own 3 children and then having an adopted child, I just wasn't sure that I could give. I think you know what I mean when I say I wasn't sure that I could give the same love to the child. And I really struggled with that for the longest time, because I could understand the reason for adopting, in the sense that, we're trying to give a child a home, and I don't like to say a better home. I just like to say a home, give them a home. But as we thought it through, as I struggled with it, I came to realize that maybe this is what I'm supposed to do, because I can take what I learned and possibly, hopefully, pass that on to someone else. But like I say, I struggled with it a lot, and so we actually ended up finally deciding to go through with the process of starting to foster, but then with this whole pandemic thing, it kind of fell through. So, but with the fostering, that also included the possibility of adoption. So, but one thing that we did ask the social worker about was the fact that if we were to foster and adopt, or possibly adopt, that it would be a Hispanic child. I struggle I still struggle with adopting a child that is Caucasian or a different race than what I am, just because of what I went through. I just feel it would be a lot easier for us as a family if we were to foster or adopt a child from our same culture. So, but like I say, that's something that we're still in the process of possibly doing, but it's a process for me. So I'm not sure. But yeah, it took me a long time to even start the the process for us.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I can pass the mic over to Maggie.
Santiago's gonna make me cry. No, but I completely 100% understand that conflict. You know, I think especially when I was younger, I always thought, you know, I definitely want to adopt. Like I always thought, like, okay, like I want to have 3 or 4 kids, and you know, at least like 1 or 2 adopted, you know, because, and I want, you know, I wanted to adopt a child from Guatemala, and this sounds strange, but you know, to really have, like, I think about the opportunities. I liked how Santiago put it, not a home, not a better home. But I do think about the opportunities that I've been afforded, you know, even just being in America and, you know, growing up how I did. And I think about, you know, what if I did adopt a child, what I could also provide for that child, you know, and some of the things, the possibilities that would open up for that as well. And I think, but then at the same time, now having my own biological children, I do go back and forth with, you know, do you not, do you have enough, just like Santiago mentioned, do you have the capacity to love them in the same way as your biological children? And which is really interesting, because I'm sure a lot of our adopted parents actually probably had these same thoughts when they adopted us, if they had biological children already. But again, I think that, especially for me, I've looked into it, and I was actually at an adoptee event, and one of our fellow Guatemalans actually told me how, because I thought that you couldn't really adopt kids from Guatemala anymore. And we've actually had a long discussion about different ways that you can. And so I have started to look into it now more. But I agree, it would have to be something where I'd want to connect with that, whether it's a girl or a boy, on that level of, you know, the things that I struggled with. Like I didn't look anything like my parents, you know, and I would want you know, whatever child I might adopt to look more like me, so that I could help with those identity issues and things like that. So I completely, again, understand that the internal conflict, and I still think, in, you know, in the back of my mind, I still want to adopt, and I don't know if that'll change over the years, but I still foresee myself at least adopting one child, whether it's domestic or international, but at least, you know, from Hispanic or Latino background. I still do.
Well, thank you so much both for sharing that. And I just wanted to emphasize something Santiago said that Maggie actually emphasized already too. But I really like how you said a home, not a better home. So home, I really like that. I also just wanted to comment on this as well, because it's something that I was talking about with a friend the other day of how a lot of adoptees get asked this question all the time, and the people asking don't always understand how deep this question is. I remember I was like 15, 16, 17 being asked if I was going to adopt a kid one day, and if I wanted, and you know, you wouldn't go up to a 16, 17-year-old and say, hey, are you going to have kids one day? But for some reason, when you're adopted, it's okay to ask that. And I used to just kind of like brush it off and be like, I'm just a teenager, I don't know. But it is such a big question, and both of your answers really emphasize how much thought and how much personal growth in identity searching it takes to kind of actually fully understand the depth of that question. And a lot of times adoptees are seen as the adoptee experts, and, oh, you're an adoptee, you might as well adopt, you know, because as an adoptee, we're labeled adoptee experts, even though a lot of us are still figuring out what adoption means to ourselves. And I think both of your answers really emphasize how much thought and how much personal growth and searching it takes to really understand adopting as an adoptee, or even considering adopting as an adoptee, because being an adoptee in itself has a lot of unanswered questions, and opening the door to even more. And it's a big question. It's a lot bigger than people may realize. So I'm really, thank you so much to both of you for answering that question. It was one of my favorite questions on the question list. And I am now going to go to the next question. And that is, did becoming a parent yourselves open the door to having questions about your own biological family? Or if you already know your biological family, did it change the relationship or impact the relationship that you may have with your biological family? I'm going to pass the mic to Santiago.
So I don't want to make it sound like I have the answers to all the questions here, but for me, for us, it did affect. I do know who my birth parents are. I have visited them several times. But I think on the last time we visited them, I had our children along, and they found out, or they realized, I think they knew, but it just hit them that my children had my last name, which is Ginrich. So it had my children are Ginrichs as well, and that hit them. They thought that I would give my children their last name for whatever reason. And so when they realized that, it really made a big negative impact on them, and we actually left, and we haven't been back because they took it so hard that they did not want us there for a bit. So yes, that part did affect our relationship. Some of them now are slowly starting to reach it back out to me again, but other than that, like some of my older siblings don't want really anything to do with me now. So that was something that I didn't expect, but that part really did affect us as a family in regards to my birth family.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I've never, it's something that we as adoptees probably don't even think about, So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I am going to pass the mic over to Andrew.
So when I had kids, and even growing up, I never cared to find my birth family. Not that there was a particular reason why. It's just I was always okay with the life I had, if that makes sense. And that I didn't want to. I knew if I found my birth family or birth mother, my adoptive mom would be okay with it because she was always there to help me with resources and answers to my questions or whatever I had needed. But once I had kids, it finally the ball started to get rolling a little bit of who are we? Where do we come from? And so, during the pandemic last March, I'm sitting at home and, I have all this free time now that I'm working at home. And instead of staring at a computer for 8 hours a day, I would walk around the house and I found my adoption binder that my mom had. And so that's really what got me going with NGG was I just started Googling things. And so last summer I found my birth family. And it's been a wild ride knowing that my birth mother's alive. I have grandparents, I have aunts and uncles, I have cousins and brothers and sisters, which has been incredible, which I'm still trying to grapple emotionally, all of that. It's still a lot, but one of the cool things about it is I have a brother and sister who have kids who are the same age as my kids. And so it's been really, we FaceTime and we'll, video chat, and my daughter will see her cousin who's her same age. And her closest cousin here is 5 or 6 years older. So it's been really a blessing to have that relationship now that we have. And it is one of the downsides of it is we try to guard it, because by no means am I wealthy. But when my daughter, she comes up and she shows her toy to the cameras and stuff like that, we try to safeguard it, just because we're trying to put in context of, we have an opportunity here. And your birth grandmother gave us that opportunity. So it opens up a whole nother discussion in that regard. But I don't know, finding my birth family was the main reason. My kids were the catalyst for it, and I'm grateful for it, I guess.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jenny.
Yeah, it's interesting what Andrew said. I can relate a lot because, when I was younger, I never really had this idea or thought to look for my family, my birth family, until this past year. Same thing, pandemic happened. I'm home more, and I was able to look through my adoption papers, like really read it. And because I don't think I really read it all the way through as a kid. And so it was really interesting. I'm like, this is really cool. And then again, I'm like, I think it would be important for me to try to discover my family. I'm still in the process, haven't found anybody, but I do feel that I would like to, in the near future, to look for my family. And I appreciate hearing other people's experiences, because there's good things, there's some negative things that could come out, can be the outcome through all of it. But I definitely feel now that my thought process of looking has changed quite a bit.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And believe it or not, we're like at the last 10 minutes of this panel. So I wanted to ask, before I look at any of the questions that are coming in from the live stream, I wanted to ask, what is one piece of advice that you would give to other adoptees who may be thinking about or planning to start their own family? I'm going to pass the mic to Maggie.
I would say just one thing that I would provide is, it is emotional. I think as adoptees, at least I know, like the three just touched on, a lot of us have identity issues. A lot of us have maybe not wanted to talk about some of these things, or, it's been a little deeper. And I think when you become a parent, whether you're a father or mother, it brings up a lot of emotions. And I would just say, be prepared for those emotions to come up. And it's okay to talk about them. Like, I think since I've become a parent, I feel like I've been way more open emotionally, just to everyone in general. But a lot also just because of talking about being adopted, talking about being from Guatemala. And I think just, again, you're going to feel as a parent, and you might also think, at least for me, how could, how, especially as a woman, with the child on me, how did she do this for 9-10 months, and then I was gone, right? And that's a really emotional factor that I was not quite prepared for when I started to get towards later in my pregnancy. So I would just say that, to be prepared for it to be emotional, and that it's okay for it to be emotional. So that would be my advice.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over to Andrew.
Yeah, I think she said it best, was emotionally prepare yourself. I was 22 when my son was born, and for 22 years I was on my own. I had my brother and my adoptive mom and cousins like that, but I always felt like I was on my own. And then when my son was born, it all happened so fast. You know, my wife holds him, then I hold my son for the first time. And emotionally, that was like, this is mine. Like, this is my blood. This is who, this is my carrying on the next generation. And so emotionally, I would just say prepare for it. You know, it's being a parent it's a roller coaster. You have good days, you have your bad days, you have your crazy days, you have, you know, angry days, but it's been a blessing throughout it all. And emotionally, it's, just prepare for it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jenny.
I would totally agree with Andrew and Maggie, what they said, emotions. Also for me, I would say it's never too late to find out who you are. I'm in my late 30s and I'm now here trying to discover who I am, but it's never too late if you're choosing to do it. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over to Santiago.
I agree with all of you. I think that's the biggest thing is the emotions that are going to come. It's not about maybe they'll come. It's about they will come. Those emotions, and just the biggest piece I can say is just expect them. You might not be able to prepare yourself because you don't know how, but expect them. Expect the emotions. It's like Andrew said, when I held my firstborn, my oldest son, for the first time, I still get emotional about it. It's just holding somebody that is your own. It's there's a lot of emotions that go through it, and I'm a dad. I don't even I don't even carry the child, so I'm not a mother, and so I'm sure that there's even more on a mother's side. So, and then also another thing, be you. I grew up in a family where I was expected to do certain things and that were not easy for me, or even necessarily that's who I was. But once I started my own family, I embraced my Hispanic culture, Guatemalan culture, and that's now who I am. Be 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 you. And if it means that, you know, whatever relationships it might affect, be you. That's important in anybody's life.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to kind of touch on this as well for our viewers who may not know this or may not think about this. For many adoptees, their own children are going to be the first biological relatives they ever meet or know. And I don't have kids myself, but I can't imagine what kind of emotions go along with that. And also just going through the process of having children, which is, you know, you have that the layered emotions, I imagine. And so thank you so much for sharing, everyone. And I'm being texted questions from the YouTube live stream. Okay. So far, the two questions I have, I think we did touch on. One of the questions was that I just had through the YouTube live stream was, how do you incorporate Guatemalan culture in your family life? I think that we touched on that a little earlier. So let's see if we have one more here. I think that's actually all the questions that I have for now. We have 5 more minutes in this panel. I just kind of wanted to open that then for open discussion. If there's anything that you believe is important to the adoptee identity or the parenting identity that we didn't touch on, or you wanted to talk about, now is the chance to do that. Please raise your hand and it looks like I just got a question actually. Oh, what is important that your children know about you or Guatemala? I'm going to pass the mic over to Maggie.
I think for me, and again, my kids are so young right now, like if I tried to tell my son anything, he wouldn't understand it quite yet. But I think for me now, especially being more part of this community and other, locally here with other adoptees, is that it's just being open about the culture. I think that's just like the biggest factor is, again, like a lot of us, I was one of those people that I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to learn about it when I was younger. It's like, that's the last thing I need is to be different. Like I'm already different. I look like this. I'm in a small town in Missouri. Like let's not also talk about how I'm from this country and no one can pronounce it. And I didn't want to talk about it, when I was younger. And so I think again, as a parent now, and as just someone who's embraced who they are, I think Jenny said that really, really well, that if you're never too old to learn who you are, that I just think talking about the culture as a parent, as an adoptee, I think that's just, if you're talking about it and they're learning, then I would say that's the number one thing that I just would hope that I can do as I parent and as they get older, is just keep that as a reminder that that's part of me and that's part of them, and to not push that away like I did when I was younger.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I actually, I relate with that a lot. And so thank you so much. And then I wanted to pass the mic over to Jenny.
Oh my gosh, I have to remember what I was going to say. Oh my goodness. So just with that communication, I think in general as a parent, I really like to have that set up an open door, open communication within our family. So I really strive to do that. And my kids are still young, but they are elementary age. So they definitely have that. I love to learn. I love to learn new things. So being able to talk to them to a point with how much they can understand has been really great, because I'm also trying to learn Spanish and they are really trying to help just with the little things like in our house, like, what does this mean, Mom? What does this mean, Dad? And it's just nice that they can see that, hey, Mom's trying to learn something. Let's join in. So I really like that.
I like that idea too, kind of like learning as a family almost. And that's, I really like that. Thank you for sharing. And we got 2 minutes left. I want to end this thing. Thank you to all our panelists for sharing such vulnerable and stories with us and answers and helping us adoptees better learn what it might be like for those of us who may be planning to start a family one day. So I just wanted to thank you all so much for being on the panel. I want to thank NGG for hosting this panel. And of course, I want to thank Gemma as well for not only, starting NGG, making this all possible, but also helping with all the tech stuff today. So I wanted to thank everybody. If you are interested in more NGG events, we are on every single social media platform you can think of. On Instagram and Twitter, we're Next Gen Guat. So that's GUATE, Next Gen Guat. Facebook, Next Generation Guatemala. We're on LinkedIn. And of course, we're on YouTube. And I think for YouTube, you just search Next Generation Guatemala and we will be that first channel to pop up. So I just wanted to kind of shout those out. If you're interested in learning more and connecting more with the community, please do so. And again, one more thank you to the panelists. Without you guys, this wouldn't have happened, of course. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone who's watching. Yeah, thank you so much. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.